Hi, Sav.
Hi, Alexis.
We're back.
We are. This is our third episode of Chrysalis Collective, the podcast. So exciting. Thank you for tuning in and listening, those of you that are here with us.
And we're excited to take a little journey talking about our experiences being in our bodies, having these bodies, what it means to walk around with the knowing that we're perceived maybe a certain way, and how that's evolved and changed over our lifespan. Because my relationship with my body now is not the one that I had obviously when I was a teen or a kid. So I think it's important that we give other people the space to unpack it along with us.
Absolutely. I think that the purpose of this podcast ultimately is to sit in shared experience and to talk about these transformative experiences and journeys, and one of those just being embodiment and understanding our relationships to our bodies and body image. This episode for listeners will contain subject matter of disordered eating and eating disorder, so take care of yourself. Sit with it. If it comes up, if you need to take a break and step away, feel like you can absolutely do that, because we are very much in a space of no limits, no filters to this conversation, but we want to be gentle on our listeners as well.
Yeah, our vulnerability is only meant to give you space to explore your own, and not as any means to like push any kind of narrative onto anybody, just because we all have our different experiences with food, with our bodies, with how we treat them, how we interact with them, how we perceive them. So it's something that I know since I was a kid, I always felt like, wow, my body it's cool. Like I get to play soccer and like I use it in a certain way. But I also did a lot of emotional eating to kind of hide some pain. I think it was like a control thing for me.
Oh yeah.
So I was also a pretty, I'm like, I just say I was a chunky kid because this is what it is. And that's how I've labeled and how others labeled me during that time. And I know that looking back on it now, I used food to cope because I didn't know anything else. I've just had those feelings of like, oh, like this feels good and I like this. And like when I'm eating, it's like just this little thing that I get to control, like
Absolutely.
something that makes me feel good. And like my relationship with food, I think, has always kind of ebbed and flowed, and I've gone through seasons of restricting and seasons of binging and purging, and it's like it's continuously evolved. And even now into adulthood, I think it's something that I still am very like cognizant of, and have had to offer a lot of grace to myself when I do notice that I may be falling into some similar patterns of just how I'm viewing my relationship with food. And I'm curious as to how you feel like in your childhood you interacted with that.
I mean, everything you're saying to me is I have very similar but somewhat unique experiences. So tell me though, I want to know, like, who labeled you? When was the first time you were labeled like as a quote unquote chunky kid? Like what's your first memory of that?
I mean, I think being like 10, around that age was when my body changed in that way. And I think that was like kind of, early pre-teeny, pre-puberty, like that's when I realized that I had that label on me. I think before then I wasn't really aware that, and I don't think that I was more of like a slim kid just because I was so active, but I think the emotional eating like really took more of a prominent role in my life around then. So that's when I like gained a lot of weight as a kid. And I was still playing soccer. I was still very active, but it's just like I wasn't, And so that's why I think, especially because I did play soccer and I was quote unquote like a chunkier kid, it was like, well, I was the defender. I was like one of the bigger girls in the back, And so that was when I first realized like, oh, this is like how my body is perceived by others. Like this specific label is the one that I fit into with what I have.
Yeah. I feel like growing up for me, the first time I ever thought that I was fat or was ever called fat, and I was a very petite child and average sized child. And I remember it specifically because I don't know exactly what we were talking about at the lunch table in like second grade. I was like 7 or 8 years old at the time, and I had read like in my textbook like what the average 8-year-old kid weighed, and I told this boy sitting at the table like, oh, I weigh 3 pounds less than the average kid. The fact that I even knew what my weight was at 7 years old to me is mind-blowing. Like my kids just don't have any perception of that. And the little boy goes, 3 pounds less than what? That a blue whale? And I was like, wait, what did you just say to me? Like that was the first time that it was ever said to me, but I started crying. And it was Valentine's Day, I remember, because the PE teacher came up to the table and was like, there's no crying on Valentine's Day. So I kind of pulled myself together there, but I don't think that was by any means the inciting moment of a struggle with disordered eating and eating disorders. But I think it was probably the most outstanding moment, like that I realized, oh, people are looking at me and judging me and my body. As a very, very young child. But I think the reality is that it had probably been happening my entire life. Excuse me. And that, I grew up in a home where food was very, very controlled and very, very black or white. Food, growing up really religious, food was an arm of the religiosity. And so food was from God or food was from the devil. But like looking back on it, the categories like are just very arbitrary. Like they were only based in my family's relationship to the food. They aren't based in like grounded in real evidence or anything like that, And so that is something that I think has been a part of my life since I was a baby, probably, is having my body and my relationship to food be not private, be a public thing. That's like not just about how I feel in my body, but how other people see me and how they feel comfortable with my body. So did you feel like growing up using food to control as like a coping mechanism? Like, was that something that you feel like you were shown?
I think that I saw it as like something that was an activity, like a communal kind of thing. I don't think that it was so much of a control. It was like more of a lack of control. So my control over it came as more of like secretive eating. Like that was the way that I found like, ooh, yeah, we may have had all of this, good stuff at dinner and, there's some of this left over. Like, I think I want some more. And so like going in after everyone's asleep and like secretly eating, that was more of how because it was like, especially in Hispanic households, like the more you eat, it's like you like our food. Right. And that, what does that mean about my cooking and how much you love me? And it's like, if you turn away a plate, or if somebody tells you, oh, I made this for you, and you say you don't want it, then it's not acceptable. Like that's not something, like I'm showing you my love in this way. And if you're not accepting it, then you're not accepting me. And so that's, I think, a bit of a difference in how I was raised, because food brings us together. And so if you're not together with us in this way, then like, why not? Like, it's just questioned.
Sure.
And so it was like more of, the more you have, the better.
Yeah. That's interesting, because it is the same, like there's the same kind of mentality behind it, behind the control and the secretive eating. But for me growing up, it was like, as soon as I realized that I could diet, and as soon as I realized I could restrict food and control what I was eating, I did. And so I became a vegetarian at age 7, but like was not a really healthy, balanced vegetarian. And I just like didn't replace my proteins really. And I really went excessively into carbs. And that was something that I kind of like have struggled with my entire life, is like balancing out nutrients. Because from a really early age, I was just restricting and not eating anything except for like buttered noodles. And eventually it became so much something that I could control that like I began just not eating, hiding my food, moving food around on my plate. I would, starve myself really for days, and then I would kind of eat like really huge meals. And then eventually started with like a pretty active bulimia, became just a pretty active part of my life. Probably, I don't remember the first time I made myself throw up, but I think it was probably 4th or 5th grade. Because I also had friends that were doing it. It was also a really big part of like the literary and media culture of, I think, our generation. Like we had a lot of books about or they were eating disorders, and like popular girls would restrict their eating in the books or make themselves throw up in the books. And so, when you're a child, like 8, 9, 10 years old, you are hearing, okay, this is what's wrong with my body. These are the ways to fix it. And like, this is an outlet I can use to have some sort of semblance of control over my life, have some sort of agency in my life. And when you're told over and over again too, like who you are is just fundamentally shameful and like not good enough, then using food to feel good enough, because food will make you feel really good. Eating it or starving yourself, both of those things can make you feel really, really good. And I think I was actively bulimic for probably 10 years at least, before I had a boyfriend in high school that was like, you have to stop this. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I do have to stop this. But of course that didn't make the internal like patterns and internal thoughts go away at all.
I'm curious as to how you felt safe enough to like have him in on that part of your life, or was it something he figured out or noticed? Like, was he observant?
I think that, if you feel like there's nobody that you can really trust and nobody else that's really accepting of you, then like you're going to turn to romantic partners like as a teenager, 17 years old, like the only person you really have is your boyfriend. If you have, sometimes like that can be, at least that's kind of how it was for me at that age. And so I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I do think I was pretty like open about it with him, that it was something that I struggled with. And after him, it was pretty like easy to share that with other partners and other people, like, hey, I have struggled with eating disorders, and that kind of thing. And nobody was really judgmental about it, because it seemed like everybody was struggling with really similar things.
That's interesting, because I feel like in my experience with purging, I really was super, super secretive about it. And like nobody talked about it. Like it was not necessarily a thing within my friend groups or like social circles that I was in, because we were athletes, and so it was like, oh, we always eat, like before a game we're grabbing food, like we were very much saw food as like fuel, and we would carb load, and so it was more of a culture of like, nah, we're all eating, like girl, you're gonna be hungry if we're out in the field, like you need fuel. But I feel like for me, I was so secretive about it, and I exercise that kind of control more in my teenage years. And the reason that I stopped and like felt like, oh, people are starting to notice, so now I'm going to stop. Like there was one time where I would always do it in the shower, like, and one time I had come out of the shower and like had finished getting ready and everything, and my dad and my mom looked at me in my face, and they just saw that I had like all of these dots underneath my face, and my eyes were super red. And that's like always been a tell for my parents, for me, when I was sick, like anytime I throw up, that's like my face shows it. And so my parents were like, are you okay? And I just remember being like, oh shit, like now I'm being too obvious about it, so now I have to like find something else. And then I went into binging. So it was like I did a hard switch, but the binging always came with purging for me, because I would feel guilty for how much I ate, and then just be like, well, I know how to handle this.
Get rid of it.
Exactly. Like how to make me feel better about this mentally. But it was just, it was all a control thing. And it's so interesting how like into adulthood, I've still struggled with seeing food as not, it is fuel for me. So like switching my mindset from it being something that I can control in that kind of pure way, to this is something that can uplift me and give me energy, and just like kind of reframing things in that way.
Food is medicine. Food is information.
Exactly.
Food is a lot of things. Food is really heavy because it's still like a really complex part of my adulthood. It's funny you said that about like your parents, because I had a moment one time, I think I was probably about 14 years old, and my mom was like, can I ask you a question? Like, did you throw up in the bathroom? Did you make, what happened? Did you throw up? And I just flat out lied. I just said no. And at some point she took me to the pediatrician to like inquire about my eating habits. And I lied to the pediatrician about, am I making myself throw up? Am I restricting my eating? I just lied. And the doctor, I think, could kind of see through it and said something like, this is called disordered eating. But into adulthood, like I think there was a lull in my disordered eating, just like using food as control in college from like 18 to getting pregnant, or 17 to getting pregnant at 19, because I was young. I wasn't really going to gain any weight no matter what I ate at that point. And I was being pretty active, like going to the gym and working out. And so like, it just didn't really feel like I was happier in my life. And so I kind of took a little bit of a break, but also probably looking back on it, like I didn't have any real education around like what am I eating? What should I be eating? Like I only knew calories. So I think if I ate less than 2,000 calories a day, fewer than that, then I was fine. Like that's all I needed to be healthy. And then I didn't realize this until later on. But when I got pregnant, like I completely went into binge mode. And was like going to Sonic and getting like multiple sodas and cheesy tater tots and eating candy and pizza and like cookie dough. And I gained 70 pounds during that pregnancy. I went from 125 pounds to almost 200 pounds. And that was the biggest shift in my body I've ever had. And I didn't realize it until a therapist told me that they said like, hey, people with eating disorders usually go a little bit like wild when they get pregnant because they feel like they finally have an excuse to just completely eat everything and anything and there's no consequences. But what it left me with was a body that I didn't understand, I didn't feel comfortable with. I felt really judged by the people in my life. Like I could just tell people like this wasn't who I was, you know. And also I was like, well, but why can't I be like, can it just be okay for me to be like not how you knew me, you know? Do I have to look the same way my entire life? And being a mom and going through pregnancy and postpartum and pregnancy and postpartum and pregnancy and postpartum, like in the span of 5 years, my body went up and down and changed a lot. And it went from like, okay, I'm this body of like a teenager that I can completely abuse it and punish my body and control my food, to like, I have to figure out how to take care of myself for the people in my life. Because I have children and I have daughters who are gonna like listen to me and listen to the words that I say about my body, and you know, and had all these internal monologues that I've just like kept secret as a mom. You know, like you don't want your daughter to feel the same way about her body that you feel about yours. And so I've tried to, you know, just feel really positive every time she says anything about my belly looking squishy or stretch marks on me or anything like that. I just say like, thank you, or yeah, that's my body, this is what happened. Like I just try to stay really neutral about it.
Yeah. Body neutrality, I feel like, is super powerful, because I think people lean super heavy into the positivity, and that's beautiful. You should celebrate your body, but also not everybody's there.
Yeah.
A lot of people just need to be just like, yes, this is, I'm not on the completely self-hating side of it. And I'm not completely on like, I'm super stoked about the one that I'm in. Like just somewhere in the middle of being like, you know what? It works for me. Yeah. Do I wake up? Can I function properly?
Yeah.
Am I, you know, what am I thankful for about it? And not even outside of like, oh yeah, I look hot, I'm, you know, whatever, like whatever perception. It's just like, I get this and I want to take care of it. I want to be kind to it.
Right. And I think like a lot of that too for me has been just the process of embodiment in general, like not feeling separate, like a separate entity from my body, you know, not like realizing my body is not just like some extra removed force from me. It is me. I am my body. And so like I am responsible for this home that I am in. And so I have to like keep up with the maintenance, even if it's not like I'm feeling incredible about that all the time. And
yeah, I love what you said about seeing it as a home. Like seeing, I think that I've moved more into the space of like seeing it as an altar, even.
Absolutely.
Like outside of what we're even putting inside of it. How are we treating it in, I'm just thinking about like me taking baths and me like, you know, putting lotion on my body and really just like gently touching on myself and treating it as something that I get to decorate and I get to, you know, have fun with. I don't have to be so in the, well, okay, how is it looking and what, it, you know, it's like it exists and it's perfect the way that it is, and it's gonna look different from day to day, like especially depending on what day of the cycle I'm on.
Absolutely.
Like, my body's going to change. That's just the only given in life is that we, you know, we're all constantly changing. And
if you're lucky enough, you'll see your body fall apart, you know, kind of in a way, you know, in a way like you aging is a gift. And like if you are fortunate enough to live a long life, then like you have to have that acceptance of like my body is moving me through this journey. My body is a vessel, is a vehicle, and it's connected to other bodies and to the earth and the ground and the wind and the elements of nature. Like it is me, but it's also bigger than me.
Exactly. This is just the vessel that I get to move throughout this space-time continuum that we're in. Like that's the power that it holds, and like I get to honor it and really show up in it the way that I want to and how I feel comfortable. And I think that that also leads me into the stream of thought of just how we having wombs, I feel like, become sexualized very easily in our bodies.
Ooh, yeah, we haven't even talked about
Yeah.
sexualization of bodies, and like, when do you remember that starting for you?
I mean, I feel like it was kind of taken from me just because trigger warning, molestation from a young age. That was something that I experienced. So I feel like I have always just been like very aware that like having this specific part of me makes me something else to other people entirely. Like there's this perception now on my body and how I'm viewed because I show up the way that I do.
Yeah, I think that it is a disgusting part of our culture, the fact that like girls, boys too. I mean, like if we're going to exist in this binary, like right now, just thinking about it, like baby girls, baby boys are automatically sexualized in their own way. Like I see this all the time as a birth worker. Even like just ridiculous statements made about like, oh, he's gonna be a heartbreaker, or you better lock her up, like somebody's gonna, like you're talking about a 2-year-old child. You're not talking about a consenting adult. And even so, like, you don't need to say anything about any of this about anybody ever. And so that's something I've tried to work on as a mother, is protecting my children, at least protecting their understanding of it, knowing that the world will do these things to them or will feel these ways about them, or that people might look at them and think about them in certain ways, but that like they have such a strong, secure sense of self that it doesn't impact them. And I think that's what was missing for me as a child, was feeling secure and loved in who I was, that it was so easy for me to be taken advantage of by other people. And it was so easy for me to fall into traps of hatred, self-loathing, shame, and all of these disordered eating patterns, because it hadn't been modeled to me, like self-love hadn't been modeled to me in that way. And it certainly wasn't passed down to me. I had to really, really fight for it. And I still have to fight for it, because I still wake up and see breakfast as a treat, like that I have to earn breakfast. And like, I'll just full transparency. Like this is what goes through my mind usually when I wake up in the morning. I will wake up and I'll be hungry, but I'll think like, okay, no, I have to have my herbal tea, or I have to have my juice first. And then I need to do yoga, and I need to do some work on my computer or whatever I'm working on right now before I can like reward myself with the meal. And then what usually happens is I'll get so hungry that like a small, or like I could do like some yogurt or an avocado or like a piece of fruit, or, something like pretty small when I first wake up. But then what happens is I'm like, my blood sugar is really low and I want like a freaking bagel with cream cheese. And so like, I'll just eat the bagel with cream cheese, because I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I've worked really hard. I deserve this thing now. And there's nothing inherently good or bad about a bagel, but what the bagel represents is all of these things. And it's also like, maybe for my hormones and my, nutrients, I should be eating like eggs or even like fish for breakfast, or spinach. I should be doing things that are like not just a bagel, just as a woman, like in my cycle. But I'll eat the bagel, and then I'll feel guilt about the bagel, and I will tell myself, you are shouldn't have had that. Now you have to like balance it out with the other things that you're going to eat today. And I will balance out my diet, you know, throughout the day and eat a lot of different things. But what I've realized is now 2-ish years postpartum from my last birth, I just went back and had my labs redrawn and realized like, oh, my minerals, my nutrients are really, really depleted. My iron is really, really depleted. Like here I am going through these cycles day in and day out of still restricting my eating, still judging my eating, still struggling to feel like I deserved to eat enough, or, you know, then feeling like also food is a really great way to punish yourself. So like eat the wrong thing because you did the wrong thing, you know? And so realizing like, okay, I'm still dealing with this, you know, 6.5 years into motherhood and 27 years old, this is still a part of my life.
Yeah. I think that idea of being deserving of food is something that I've struggled with in the past, definitely. And it's like, I need to eat.
Yes.
It's not a
Yeah, it's
matter
not
of
an
being
option.
deserving. Yeah, it's like
It's not.
I need to. And I think that also I have noticed, especially like into my adulthood, with all of the holistic modalities of figuring out what's the best way to eat for my body. Like I've gone through phases where I like completely cut out gluten or dairy, or am vegetarian. And like I similarly saw that like when I was gluten-free, vegetarian, and dairy-free, my hair was starting to fall out.
Absolutely.
Like
me too.
I was very like, my body was telling me this is not working for you.
Right.
But I was such a stubborn person in the sense of like, well, I said I wanted to be vegetarian for like at least a year. So I like stuck it out way longer than I probably should have. And then the repairing after that of figuring out, well, what is my body asking for? What do I need? And it's been, a continuous journey of me also realizing that like fasting and this whole like intermittent fasting culture, and like, sure, holistically there are some benefits, but for somebody that has a history of disordered eating, that really set me way back in comparison to if I just didn't do it, you know? And I feel like I noticed that the more often I would fast, the more often I would binge afterwards. And so it's not something that works for me. And I know that now. And I've come to just see how I eat day to day as something that's like, I can eat things and not have to make myself feel bad about it afterwards. Like, it's just, okay, today I ate this.
Yeah.
Did I feel good about it? Yeah.
Did you have fun while you were doing it?
Yeah, like sometimes do I overeat at times? Yeah, but then I'm not going to sit there and like not give myself grace, because when I do that, I keep on feeding into the cycle of, well, it's my last time. Well, it's, like if I'm going to do it all now, that means I can't do it after this at all, ever. And it's like, it's just such a black and white
scarcity mindset too, with it. Like that, there's not going to be an opportunity to like enjoy living in your body. Like you have to work really, really hard to control all of these different elements and control your relationship to food, because we don't believe about ourselves or believe about, our bodies, that we are okay and that we are safe and that there's a plan for us to get through this naturally, that our bodies can carry us, through our lifetimes, and trusting in them, because it's just something that is really hard when it was either taken from you or when you never had it in the first place, to hold on to that.
Yeah.
And I liked what you said about like the kind of the trends and the intermittent fasting culture and all of those things. Because like being in holistic living and natural motherhood stuff too, like the non-toxic crunchy mom like to orthorexia pipeline is like really, really true, and like something that I've really struggled with too, because like I will say like, okay, I'm not going to eat seed oils, or I'm not going to eat, these types of ingredients. But then what will happen is I'll be so hyper focused on avoiding those things that I will eat just not enough food and not like actually nourishing food. And so like if hummus has seed oil in it and I avoid it, and then I go and not eat anything, or I eat just an apple that makes my blood sugar crash when I could have had hummus and a carrots, or like a more full snack and gotten the benefits from that food, like what's the purpose?
Yeah, we're just shifting the control.
Yeah,
like
just shifting
all
the
that
control.
it is.
Absolutely. Oh man, it's heavy, and I think it's a lifelong journey. And for me, I'm very focused right now on not repeating the cycles with my own children. My daughter is my oldest daughter is 6.5, and I can't read her mind and I don't know her every thought, but she seems so confident in herself and seems so confident in her body. I've never heard her say anything negative about herself or anybody else's bodies. She'll say curious things about people's bodies, but she doesn't have a sense of judgment. And I hope that she has a sense of, self-love, that I'm laying the foundation of that with her, so that when she feels, challenged by the things in her universe, like pulling her in different directions, that she'll have a sense of security in who she is, and understand, that food isn't good or bad, that food is food and everything can serve a purpose, and that it's up to her to make the intuitive choices, in what she's going to choose in those moments. And there's no wrong or right, but she should listen to how she feels.
Yeah. Giving her that power in that way is definitely something that I wish I also had growing up. Like,
I don't think I do it perfectly either, though, because it's a balance. Kids will want to eat a lot of treats or a lot of sugar. They want the fun foods, and so like you can't just be completely laissez-faire about it. And it's up to you realizing, like, as a parent, okay, if I don't buy it, we don't have it in the house, so like I do get to choose what's in my house. But you can't have 15 yogurt pouches in a day. Like, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. But like, how can I work with you to make intuitive eating choices? And it's a struggle. Like, I feel confronted by it and I feel triggered by it a lot of the times. And I've probably overcorrected and undercorrected in a lot of ways. And so it's kind of an experiment. Like, I just don't know what my daughter's and my son's relationships with food are going to be like quite yet, but I hope that at least there will be a little bit of change.
Well, I think that just what you were speaking on earlier of, just having non-judgment for people's bodies is like, I feel like a very solid foundation and base to go off of, because then it's something that we're actively giving. That's like a gift to not have that judgment and that kind of intertwined into the perception of when you look at someone. Like,
oh yeah, and I mean, I grew up hearing like my parents just talk so poorly about people, in front of me as a child, and it was funny, like to judge people and to criticize people's bodies, or to make fun of larger bodies. Like, all of that was just like great and funny, and it was funny on TV too, So I think exposure is a huge part of it. But now, in this place where you are, like, what would you tell yourself, looking back?
That I'm perfect the way that I am. I think that that's an affirmation I've had to speak to my inner child more often.
Yeah.
Definitely. What about you?
Yeah, I think that I would tell myself as a little girl, like, nothing about you is broken. There's nothing you need to fix. And don't change anything because who you are is absolutely good enough. So I think that I love how you talk about it as like an inner child perspective, because that's all that I think aging really is, growing up really is, and being an adult now is like reparenting that inner child.
Yeah, speaking to those versions of us that needed that then.
Absolutely.
And how we can give them the love they didn't get at that time. We can still offer that to ourselves. And it gives us our power back when we do that. Definitely.
I love it. I think that that's a good place to end it for today. We are the Chrysalis Collective. I am Savannah Taylor.
And I am Alexis.
We are on Instagram at, what's our Instagram?
the_Chrysalis_Collective.
Okay, yeah, don't forget the underscores. And you can email us at info@chrysaliscollective.me. We are having our full moon gathering on January 25th in Houston, Texas at EQ Heights to celebrate the launch of Chrysalis Collective. That is also Alexis's birthday. So if you're in Houston and you're listening to this episode before that date, please come out and say hi, meet us. We will be launching some offerings coming up in the spring. So make sure to follow us on Instagram because there's a lot to come. This is just the beginning. So thank you for following along and listening with us.
See you next time.
See ya.